That is insane. So is that what he looked like? Look like what? It's a... Wait, he don't have a nose neither? No. Why is his nose? Wait. Sorry. Chat. Wait, I have a question. Why is his nose gone? Wait, what happened to her nose? What happened to her nose? Why is her nose cut off? That's why we had the recent. Berean Scholar.
Waking up the people of the Most High. I got the knowledge to destroy the lies. DNA, history, open eyes. Walk into the darkness and turn on the lights. Wake up, 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 wake up.
Who the hell is that?
Welcome back to Berean Scholar. The YouTuber iShowSpeed just stirred up a lot of controversy. His recent trip to Egypt exposed a lot of falsehoods. Look at some of these clips right here.
Finally, we are live. Spin up the W's in the chat. It is currently 7 a.m. right now. 7 a.m. And guess where we at, y'all? Guess where we at? We are here. We are here at the Great Pyramids of Egypt. And today, we are about to make history.
18 dynasty. Okay.
That looks insane.
Tall, like 11 meters, and his weight is 83 tons.
83 tons.
Yes, from granite stone.
That is insane. So is that what he looked like? Look like
what? It's a...
Wait, he don't have a nose neither?
No.
Why is his nose? Wait.
Sorry.
Chat. Wait, I have a question. Why is his nose gone?
We have two reasons. The first one, because the erosion factors. This is the weakness point of the statue. Because erosion factors, it's broke the nose. And maybe the second reason, because any king after this king tried to broke his nose to be the strongest one.
Oh. So it's the ego thing, huh?
Yes.
Wait, what happened to her nose? What happened to her nose? Why is her nose cut off? Did it fall off, chat?
Everyone ask me when you just come here why Sphinx is without nose. It's famous from Egypt and some countries. Who broke a nose? The historian man Makrizi from Islamic era. Write inside his book and say, a man his name Sa'im al-Dahr do this. But why? Why Sa'im al-Dahr do this? Because he won't be proof. For some people, it is just a statue, just stone, not God. For this, he just broke a nose and say, he can protect himself. What he do? He just a stone.
Oh, so he was trying to prove that the statue was not a god.
Not a God.
So he broke the nose.
Mm-hmm.
Ivan van Sertima was a Guyanese-born British associate professor of Africana Studies at Rutgers University, author of many great books such as Egypt Revisited, African Presence in Early Europe, The Golden Age of the Moor. And they came before Columbus. Listen to what he says about the noses of a great Sphinx.
Do not confuse modern Egypt with ancient Egypt. These are two totally different worlds. Here we are in America, and it would be very difficult to find an American in this room. We call ourselves Americans because we are in America. We are American citizens. But there are African people here, European people perhaps, Asian people, but no Americans. I am part American, I am part Makusi Indian and part African, but it would be difficult to find an American audience that is pure American. That's why Egypt, do you go to Egypt and you said the Arab is not an Egyptian? The people who built the pyramids We're not Arabs. I know, man, because I am responsible for returning to the bloody Arabs the splinters of the Sphinx's nose and chin, and the Arabs do not want to remake it because it looks Negro.
Are you serious right now, bro?
We can go into the graves. We can go into the graves and we find the hard evidence. The skeletal evidence is overwhelming. But you see, Egypt was so rich. The Africans were so extraordinary. And they were not superior people. You don't have inferior and superior people. This is what makes you superior and inferior. A certain vision of the world. A certain vision of yourself. Many of us have been destroyed. Reduced. Because we've been made to accept other people's vision of us.
My people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge, because thou hast rejected knowledge. I will reject you. Thou shalt be no priest to me. See, thou forgot the laws of the Elohim. I will also forget thy children. Hosea chapter 4, verse 6.
What happened to her nose? Why is her nose cut off?
Now, let's listen to Dr. Joel A. Freeman, who holds a PhD in kinesiology at the University of Georgia. Also has a website online that you can visit yourself.
In 1787, Count Constantine de Volney, a French nobleman, philosopher, historian, Orientalist, and politician, embarked on a journey to the east in late 1782 and reached Ottoman Egypt, where he spent nearly 7 months. Constantine de Volney was troubled much by the institution of slavery. His expressed opinion that the ancient Egyptians were black Africans much departed from the typical European view of the late 18th century, but it gave many people cause for reflection. During his visit to Egypt, he expressed amazement that the Egyptians, whose civilization was greatly admired in Europe, were not white. All the Egyptians, wrote de Volney, have a bloated face, puffed up eyes, flat nose, thick lips, in a word, the true face of the mulatto. I was tempted to attribute it to the climate, but when I visited the Sphinx, its appearance gave me the key to the riddle. On seeing that head, typically Negro in all its features, I remembered the remarkable passage where Herodotus says, "As for me, I judge the Colchians to be a colony of the Egyptians because, like them, they are black with woolly hair." When I visited the Sphinx, I could not help thinking that the figure of that monster furnished the true solution to the enigma of how the modern Egyptians came to have their mulatto appearance. In other words, the ancient Egyptians were true Negroes of the same type as all native-born Africans. That being so, we can see how their blood, mixed for several centuries with that of the Greeks and Romans, must have lost the intensity of its original color, while retaining nonetheless the imprint of its original mold. Just think, de Volney declared incredulously, that this race of black men, today our slave and the object of our scorn, is the very race to which we owe our arts, sciences, and even the use of speech. Just imagine, finally, that it is in the midst of people who call themselves the greatest friends of liberty and humanity that one has approved the most barbarous slavery and questioned whether black men have the same kind of intelligence as whites. In other words, the ancient Egyptians were true Negroes of the same stock as all the autochthonous peoples of Africa, and from the datum one sees how their race, after some centuries of mixing with the blood of Romans and Greeks, must have lost the full blackness of its original color, but retained the impress of its original mold.
This is going to be a very controversial video because of its ongoing debate. But I still don't understand why some people are still debating on this. I think there are some reason to that, and I will get to that in another video, but in this one, we are going to watch a short clip that will confirm what we as Africans have known for ages. Now let's watch the video.
But the CT scan has one more surprise for Alejandro. Shammai's ethnicity.
Well, they have just told me that Shammai have Nubian features, which means that their ruling family was probably Nubian. and that was unexpected.
Examining Shammai's anatomy closely, the thickness of his bones and the shape of his nasal cavity, the anthropologists think he was a black African, likely from neighboring Nubia. A huge revelation that challenges the prevailing image of the Egyptian ruling class.
We always thought the ancient Egyptian elite were Mediterranean type, and in this sense, Shammai is representing the society of the frontier, in which different ethnic groups were mixed. At the end, it doesn't matter the color of your skin. Shammai was Egyptian.
The archaeologist in the video is Alejandro Jimenez Serrano. He and his team found a tomb on the western bank of the Nile, opposite Aswan. And as you might have heard, the mummy was called Shammai. So who was Shammai? Not much is known about him, but the little that we know is that he was an ancient Egyptian official who later became a vizier towards the end of the 8th dynasty during the first intermediate period. And his time in office is somehow interpreted as a sign of extreme weakness of the central power. And as you might know, ancient Egypt was in decline during the 2 intermediate periods in its history, and Mr. Jimenez Serrano just discovered that as far back as the 8th dynasty, the ruling class had Nubian features, and he finds this unexpected. That's really telling, don't you think?
A recent study was conducted by Dr. Anna Maria Makota. Published in 2005, the study sought to test the quality of methods of rehydration for mummified tissue. In the study, samples were taken from a pool of 273 mummies. Dated from the New Kingdom, samples were taken from each organ of each of the mummies. During analysis of the skin samples, biologists noted that skin sections showed particularly good tissue preservation. Although much of the epidermis had already separated from the dermis, the remaining epidermis often was preserved well. The basal epithelial cells were packed with melanin as expected for specimens of Negroid origin. In essence, the epidermis was consistent with black or Negroid African groups based on the density of the melanin. This objective conclusion gives a silent nod to the tireless efforts of Diop and his protégés, who always knew that given the opportunity to test, the ancient Egyptians would be proven to be amongst the same ethnic stock as their African brethren.
Another one.
Distance from the forehead to the back of the skull is long in relation to the overall height of the cranium. And that's something that you see quite frequently in certain populations, one of which is ancient Egyptians. Another would be black African groups, well, also certain populations, one of which is ancient Egyptians. Another would be black African groups.
Ancient Egyptians, black African group.
In a study of 2,861 Egyptian skulls, spanning the pre-dynastic and all dynasties, well over 95% of Egyptian skulls were classified as dolichocephalic. Strong dolichocephaly is typical of southern Nilotic African populations, such as the Kalenjin and Maasai, whose cephalic index of 73% is virtually identical to that of the ancient Egyptians. Yet this index is so far from the norms of Eurasian brachycephalic skulls that they would be considered a deformity within such populations.
Anything but the Negroes. Anyone but the Negroes. Here we go again. Initially, this nonsense in Egypt started with Kevin Hart's situation. According to the Telegraph article, Netflix drama angers Egyptians by casting black actress as Cleopatra. This movie is produced by Jada Pinkett Smith, who wants to tell stories about black queens. A Netflix series has sparked a backlash in Egypt by portraying Cleopatra as black. A trailer for the new historical series shows the 1st century ruler of Egypt as a woman of black African descent. After producer Jada Pinkett Smith, the wife of Will Smith, cited the importance of telling stories about black queens. The decision to cast a black actress in the role of the queen has caused anger in Egypt, where experts have argued that the queen was of European descent and not black. It has been pointed out that the ruler was descended from Ptolemy, a general of Alexander the Great, making the queen of light-skinned Macedonian Greek heritage. The leading Egyptian archaeologist, Dr. Zahi Hawass, has released a statement online saying that Cleopatra was not black. Zahi Hawass is the chairman of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, the SCA, and Undersecretary of State to the Ministry of Culture. He added, "The film that is coming to Netflix is not accurate and gives wrong information on ancient Egypt. Cleopatra was Greek, and she was similar to the queens and princesses of Macedonia." Is this true that Cleopatra was a European? Is it true that Cleopatra was a white woman? When and how did Dr. Zahi Hawass become the authoritative voice of confirmation of who is who? Dr. Baval and Thomas Brophy, PhD, has a lot to say about Zahi Hawass' deceptive agenda in the book titled Black Genesis: The Prehistoric Origins of Ancient Egypt. In this book, on page 171 and 172, Dr. Baval and Professor Thomas Brophy shares Sheikh Diop's silver bullet, the proven scientific method that can determine skin color by the analysis of the melanin content in mummies from ancient Egypt. And he insists that, contrary to the words of the Egyptologists, it was entirely possible to determine the melanin content of ancient mummies by microscopic analysis in the laboratory. Melanin, or more precisely, eumelanin, is a naturally produced polymer responsible for skin pigmentation. It is insoluble and can be preserved for millions of years, such as in the skin of fossilized creatures. Diop claimed that it can be measured in the skin of Egyptian mummies, even through Egyptologists lament that the skin of mummies is tainted by embalming material and thus is no longer acceptable to such analysis. Diop rejected this by showing that although the outer epidermis is where the melanin is usually found, melanocytes are particles deeper in the skin where they are not destroyed by the mummification process. From samples of common Egyptian mummies from the Musée de l'Homme in Paris, Diop was able to show high melanin levels that are not found in white-skinned people. Diop wanted to apply the same analysis to royal mummies kept in Egypt, but the Egyptian authorities refused to give him any samples, not even the few millimeters of skin tissue that are required for such analysis. On page 172 and 173, Diop also reviewed the various statements made by ancient Greeks and Romans who visited Egypt, as did Martin Bernal later in Black Athena. Diop asserts that if we accept what the ancient Greeks and Roman writers say, and frankly, there are no good reason why we shouldn't, then we must conclude that the ancient Egyptians were black-skinned. For these writers leave us with no doubt that they saw the Egyptians as dark or black men. Egyptologists, on the other hand, insist that we should not take seriously these ancient writers. A few Greek and Roman writers made clear Diop's point. Herodotus, 450 BCE, who is considered the father of history, states that it is in fact manifest that the Colchidians are Egyptians by race. Several Egyptians told me that in their opinion, the Colchidians were descendants from the soldiers of Sesostris. I had conjectured as much myself from 2 pointers. Firstly, because they have black skin and kinky hair. Aristotle, 320 BCE. The great philosopher and father of scientific thinking speaks rather derogatorily about the Egyptians, but nonetheless shows that he too regarded them as black skin. Those who are too black are cowards, like, for instance, the Egyptians and Ethiopians. But those who are excessively white are also cowards, as we can see from the example of women. The complexion of courage is between the two, in other words, brown or tanned. Aeschylus, 480 BCE, in his play The Suppliants, comment on an Egyptian ship. I can see the Egyptian crew with their black limbs and white tunics. Apollodorus, 70 BCE, affirms that Egyptos conquered the country of the black-footed ones and called it Egypt after himself. Greek writers, Lucian, 180 BCE, presents a dialogue between two Greeks, Lensinus and Timolas, discussing a young Egyptian boy. Lensinus, this boy is not merely black. He has thick lips and his legs are too thin. His hair worn in a plait behind shows that he is not a free man. On page 175 of the same source. Again, Diop's crowning moment was at UNESCO's symposium in January 1974 in Cairo, where he and a colleague, Professor Obenga, carefully presented their scientific findings to a large audience of Egyptologists and anthropologists from all parts of the world. The UNESCO organizers, however, were clearly impressed by Diop and commissioned him to write the entry on their origins of the pharaohs and their general history of Africa, published a few years later in 1981. Some very senior French Egyptologists, notably Professor Jean Vercoter and Professor Jean Lecamp, had been very impressed with Diop's professional presentation. In reality, the resistance to accept or even consider Diop's thesis came not from Egyptologists in general, but specifically from high Egyptian officials, as is well demonstrated by Dr. Zahi Hawass. Now, according to Denison University article titled "The Modern Racial Politics of Cleopatra," it says the most prominent gaps are found in Cleopatra's mother's identity and her grandmother's. In 2009, a group of BBC presenters, archaeologists, proposed, based on analysis of a body claimed to be that of Arsinoe, Cleopatra's sister, that their mother had an African skeleton. It has also variously been argued that her paternal grandmother was indigenous Egyptian and so potentially black. Despite these attempts to understand the anomalies in Cleopatra's family history, for the most part, when asked, most scholars and students of the Greco-Roman world will say without hesitation, Cleopatra the Seventh. Most of you don't understand that there were more than one Cleopatras. So Cleopatra number 7 was white, of Macedonian descent, as were all of the Ptolemy rulers who lived in Egypt. They often even dismissed the speculations that she may not be white as not credible. The reality, however, is that white and black are not ancient categories of race or ethnicity, and Egyptian, Macedonian, Greek, and African have different modern meanings and invoke different political and social affiliations than they did in antiquity. Even the qualification that Cleopatra was a Macedonian Greek echoes the contemporary disputes over the use of the name Macedonia. Trying to decide into which of these identities Cleopatra fits is like putting a round peg into a square hole. More importantly, when scholars perpetuate the idea that her family tree defines her Greekness, Egyptianness, Africanness, or even her race at all. They perpetuate the idea that the modern racial identities we inhabit are universal across time and place. But Cleopatra does not have a race as we understand it, and to make any claims to being able to identify the true racial background of Cleopatra is to perpetuate a modern political position. She cannot be at least 50% Egyptian or pure Macedonian Greek, because such things are modern socially and politically important and structure forms of identity. Race is not a genetic truth. According to the BBC article, Cleopatra's mother was African. Cleopatra, the last Egyptian pharaoh, renowned for her beauty, was part of Africa, says a BBC team, which believes it has found her sister's tomb. Queen Cleopatra was a descendant of Ptolemy, the Macedonian general who ruled Egypt after Alexander the Great. But remains of the queen's sister, Princess Arsinoe, found in Ephesus, Turkey, indicate that her mother had an African skeleton. Experts have described the results as a real sensation. The discovery was made by Hilke Thur of the Austrian Academy of Sciences. It is unique in the life of an archaeologist to find the tomb and the skeleton of a member of Ptolemaic dynasty, she said.
In fact, I have irrefutable, undeniable evidence.
So all the evidence point towards a black ancient Egyptian people. Why do scientists, scholars, and others try so hard to hide this evidence?
And they do this because they know that they have to draw the line for where the blackness began and ended. And if they give up ancient Egypt, they'll give up the Nubians, they can't deny that. But they will fight tooth and nail to give up ancient Kemet, because if they give that up, they know they also have to give up ancient Israel, ancient Arcadia, ancient Samaria, and all the other civilizations that are in this region. They would also have to give those up too. And of course, that's a little difficult for them to do. They will fight tooth and nail to draw the line at what is now Nubia. And so it's all part of a conspiratorial effort to keep the African world in darkness. And the funny thing about it is that when we come and challenge them, they have to back off of it, but they're always testing to see, do they know? How much do they know? They already know all of what we're talking about. It's not even something new for them. They have it all locked away in the British Museum and in the, what's the place in Paris? This is how they do it. The Louvre and so forth. All that history is there. So we're in Northeast Africa. We're in the heart of African civilization. Quiet as it's kept, all of the early humanity look like African people.
Well, come on, tell me more.
Okay, naturally, where we are situated, where we're sitting right now in this particular room in the city of Dimona. Dimona is located in southern Judea, and Judea is pretty much right in the center of what was called in our old geological historical classes. It was the middle of the Fertile Crescent. And the Fertile Crescent was, of course, where great civilization sprang up. The Jordan Valley is right in between the great Mesopotamian region, the Sumerian civilization, the area that Abraham did come from. And of course, in the southern portion of the crescent, you have the Nile Valley. And so we are right situated in the middle of that particular Fertile Crescent that history gives credit to as being the seat and the bed of early civilizations. And so this is, even though it's called the Middle East, that is another era of time in which such a term was even coined. And of course, we're talking about the British. And so that's a relatively new, that's a very, very new and contemporary designation. But we're in Northeast Africa. We are in the northeastern corner of the land that in our times has been called Africa, But again, going back to the Hebraic context for us, this is Eden. This is the garden that was eastward in Eden. And the boundaries of that garden were defined by 4 rivers. Well, what are those 4 rivers? The first and the second were the Blue and the White Niles. The third and the fourth were the Tigris and the Euphrates. Now, our friends at National Geographic, they would have us believe that the first 2 rivers are in the Persian Gulf and are submerged now. In the National Geographic, they should be ashamed of themselves because they know better. They'll use the scriptural references to document that the Tigris and the Euphrates were the 3rd and the 4th rivers, but then when they want to identify what these first 2 rivers were, they don't use any scripture references whatsoever, because they refer specifically to rivers that compass or encompass the lands of Ethiopia. And they know then that they would have to acknowledge the Africanness and the dark-skinned nature of the peoples of antiquity in these regions here. We're in Northeast Africa. The peoples of this land in antiquity, all of those who descended from the Abrahamic tradition and adhered to those traditions, they were hands down African people. It's not even a subject open for debate. Of course, again, National Geographic would have us to believe that the only time that they give us credit for Black people ruling in ancient Egypt was a 70-year period when the Nubians conquered ancient Egypt, and they only were able to accomplish that by virtue of mimicking ancient Egyptians. And they do this because they know that they have to draw the line for where the Blackness began and ended. And if they give up ancient Egypt, they'll give up the Nubians, they can't deny that, but they will fight tooth and nail to give up ancient Kemet, because if they give that up, they know they also have to give up ancient Israel, ancient Arcadia, ancient Samaria, and all the other civilizations that are in this region. They would also have to give those up too. And of course, that's a little difficult for them to do. They will fight tooth and nail to draw the line at what is now Nubia. And so it's all part of a conspiratorial effort to keep the African world in darkness. And the funny thing about it is that when we come and challenge them, they have to back off of it, but they're always testing to see, do they know? How much do they know? They already know all of what we're talking about. It's not even something new for them. They have it all locked away in the British Museum and in the, what's the place in Paris? This is how they do it. The Louvre and so forth. All that history is there. Coming in of the Roman era and the military and political, great military pressure coming from the north. And then when Israelites and other surrounding Northeast African tribes people were scattered at the hands of the Romans, the understanding is somehow that, they must have gone to the north, that the so-called 10 lost tribes in Judah and Benjamin must have ended up in Russia, Poland, Germany, Czechoslovakia, Austria, those areas. And that doesn't make sense. If a military power is coming from your north, you wouldn't flee to your north. You would flee south. And of course, biblically, there's tons of interactions between ancient Israel and ancient Egypt. And the movement, even during the time of Joseph again, during the time of Yeshua's parents spirited him away into Egypt, where he was hidden away from Herod's decree. There was always a long engagement and a connection of interaction with ancient Egypt and points further south. So when you look at the migration patterns of peoples from this land at the hands of the Romans and on up into the 14th, 15th centuries, you'll find that those patterns lead them into West Africa, lead them into Central Africa, lead them into even Southern Africa. And when you begin to look at the various ethnic groups in Africa, the Lemba in South Africa, in Zimbabwe in South Africa, they claimed that they were Israelites, and that was their cultural history. And of course, many years they were denied and told, no, you couldn't possibly be connected to the Jews. Well, they got up the nerve to do a DNA test, and the DNA test did indeed prove that their connections are authentic. In fact, more so than the Ashkenazi Kohen line coming out of Europe. So when you begin to look at these peoples, their history, their culture, their oral traditions will say that we came from the Northeast, and some of them directly link back up to being Israelites or having been in bondage in Egypt. The Ga that live in the Accra region of Ghana today, they have a festival called Homowo, and during that festival they smear red clay on the doorposts. Well, if that's not reminiscent of Passover, then we're blind. But these are obvious historical connections that prove and show for us that the Israelites ended up scattered throughout Africa, and of course it was from West Africa that those like unto myself ended up on those slave ships and were brought into the Western Hemisphere. And you'll find those same threads of cultural continuity when you look at the roots and origins of the people that live in Brazil, the Afro-Brazilians. They practice what's really Yoruba traditions, and the Yoruba link back up to Israel. When you look in the Caribbean, well, where did Bob Marley get the idea to sing about Exodus and Zion Train? Of course, the Rastafarian influence, the connections, and that thread brings you back across into East Africa, Ethiopia, but also from the thread of the union of the lineage of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, back to Israel again. And of course, in America, North America, where I originated, where I was born and raised, we sang songs as the only form of legal expression. We were to read or write or preach or teach out of the Bible was often forbidden and punishable by death in many instances. But to sing those songs in the fields, we didn't sing about the river Niger, the river Gambia, the river Volta. We sang about the river Jordan. We didn't sing about Mali, Songhai, or Timbuktu. We sang about Jericho, Jerusalem, and Canaan's land. And we can document that this actually predates any missionary exposure. We didn't learn about the Bible from Europeans. There's documentation that proves that when the first European explorers went into West Africa, Mungo Park, one of them, a Scottish explorer, he found a brother who was a schoolmaster who had the first 5 books of the Bible in Arabic. And he was giving out the stories of Joseph and his brethren, Solomon, David, Moses. And he gave these stories out as part of their own folklore. And when he found out that this European knew the same stories, he was surprised. So our exposure to the Bible and biblical culture, Hebraic culture, was not via European missionaries. It was already part of our inbred culture that we carried with us, even though we may have gone butt naked from the western shores of Africa into the Western Hemisphere. But we arrived there with these cultural memories and a continuity of purpose and a lineage that took us back to this land.
In 325 CE, Constantine gathered over 300 bishops. Almost none were Israelites. At Nicaea, doctrines were voted on, scriptures were debated, Greek philosophy shaped beliefs, Israelite customs were suppressed, and the Hebrew identity of the faith was removed. This wasn't an apostolic council, it was a Roman political assembly deciding the future of the Hebrew faith. Nicaea disconnected the faith from its Israelite roots and replaced it with a Roman religious system. From that moment on, Rome changed the holy days, outlawed Israelite customs, enforced European iconography, spread a white messiah worldwide, and used Christianity as a weapon of empire. Through colonization, crusades, slavery, and mission work, Rome exported a redesigned religion to the entire world. Yet, beneath all these layers of distortion, one truth remains untouched. Yahweh was an Israelite. His people were melanated. His name carried power, his culture carried covenant, and the promises belonged to the children of Israel. No empire can erase that. No translation can override it. No council can override it. The truth is rising again. We now know what the world tried to hide: his color, his name, his culture, his people, and your identity. This awakening isn't just information, it's a transformation, it's a calling, it's destiny. The people the world cast down are the very people Yahweh has lifted up as his chosen. As Deuteronomy 7:6 states, "For thou art a holy people unto Yahweh thy Elohim." Yahweh thy Elohim hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth. And Amos 3, 1-2 reminds us, hear this word that the Most High spoken against you, O children of Israel, against the whole family which I brought up from the land of Egypt, saying, you only have I known of all the families of the earth. Being chosen isn't comfort. It's an inheritance of bloodline. It's a calling. It's a responsibility, a divine summit by the Most High. The world is now being forced to confront this long hidden truth. The children of the slave trade are the children of Israel. The question isn't who are the chosen, but now that you know who you are, will you rise to the responsibility of being chosen?
A lot of people are waking up now.
What do you think about this topic? Remember to be a Berean scholar. As it is written in the book of Acts 17 verses 11-12. Now the Bereans were more noble-minded than the Thessalonians, for they received the message with great eagerness and examined the scriptures every day to see if these teachings were true. It's time to deepen your understanding and see your reflection within the sacred pages. Please click subscribe, and click the notification bell to stay up to date with the Berean Scholar channel.